All right, tonight we are joined by Julie Carmean, who's the Senior Educator and Manager of the National Teacher Programs for the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. She has developed and implemented professional development programs for educators nationally and internationally, on-site and online. She and her team produced the National Gallery's two massive open online courses for teachers, serving over 30,000 participants since its launch in 2019. Teaching Complex Thinking Through Art recently launched this spring of 2024. She leads annually the Summer Institute for Educators, a convening of educators around ideas of integrating art into pedagogy, most recently exploring the role of art in supporting social emotional learning. Julie first became aware of Project Zero research and pedagogies as an arts and education master's student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and has found powerful applications in both the classroom and museum. We're also joined by her colleague, Heidi Hinish, who has worked as a museum educator and manager at the National Gallery of Art for more than 30 years, currently serving as head of gallery and studio learning. Heidi's educational work has been inspired by research at Harvard University's Project Zero, especially those initiatives that foreground critical thinking, active learning, and social justice. She is a regular faculty member at the Project Zero Summer Classroom and Washington International School's Summer Institute for Teachers. In her spare time, Heidi loves to play with her dog Pink and teach fitness classes. Welcome to y'all both. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's always a little embarrassing, like when somebody reads your bio. Thank you, really. We're
Thank
so
you, Laura.
happy to be here. Yeah. And so I don't know, Julie, if you want to share our PowerPoint and we can get that going. So I just want to say welcome. I just want to invite, I know some folks already started to do this automatically, but we'd love to know who's in the room with us. So if you could please just drop some information about yourself in the chat, whatever you feel like, maybe what you teach and your grade levels, where you're joining us from in Texas, maybe something you're looking forward to this fall. We just want to bring your spirit and voice into this room. So let us know what you teach, where you are. We're so happy to be here. Colleen, Texas, DC, US history. Alyssa is middle school social studies from El Paso. Maria, we have got 8th grade US history from San Antonio. Awesome. Eric works at Humanities Texas in Austin. Former life taught middle and high school English. Thank you. Anthony, 8th grade US history. Lavernia, junior high school. Lavernia Junior High School is Isaiah, 8th grade US history. Thank you. Plano, Texas, secondary social studies. That's Clark. Thank you so much. And Isaiah's looking forward to Thanksgiving break. Awesome. It'll be here before we know it. Amy's 8th grade. Oh, it's going fast now. All right, Amy, we have 8th grade social studies. Joy from Fort Worth, grade 6 world cultures. Kathleen is from Colleyville, the DFW area, working on preschoolers. Lovely. Adolescents in the future, though. Julia Scott is an art teacher, and she's in a secondary classrooms, math, history for 7th graders, Lubbock area. Thank you all so much. It is wonderful to be here with you. As Laura said, I'm Heidi Hinish, head of gallery and studio learning, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Julie Carmean, who's head of our national teacher programs. And we just want to thank you so much for joining us. As you said, it is a Monday. We also want to thank Liz James, Laura Willis, Eric Lupfoil, and Elizabeth Fry at Humanities Texas for inviting us to be here. It's really an honor to be working with them. Let's go on to our next slide. And our time today is going to be guided by two big questions. The first is, how might works of art help us and our students engage in complex thinking about American history? The other is really, how might we make connections between works of art from the past and our lives today to deepen understanding about both the past and the present? These are questions we think about a lot in our work with teachers and students at the gallery. And as I was reading through the hopes and challenges that you all shared prior to this workshop, I could see a lot of connections. But these are questions you're grappling with as well. So Julie and I hope that you find some really useful takeaways from our workshop today. And we're going to save some time at the end of the session to hear your reflections. So as we go along, please make some mental notes about what's resonating with you as a learner and as an educator. And then the last thing I want to share before I kind of give you the sort of advanced organizer for our time together, I want to mention that I would love if everyone just had a pencil and paper. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. So if you have a pencil and something to write on, or a pen and something to write on, just to jot down a few notes throughout the course of this session, that would be awesome. So here's how we're going to spend our time together. For the next 50 minutes or so, we are going to deeply explore one work of art. And to help scaffold and guide this experience, we're going to be using a thinking routine called See, Think, Me, We. Now, thinking routines have been developed by researchers at Harvard University's Project Zero in collaboration with K through 12 educators. And basically, a thinking routine is something you're probably already using, even if you're not calling it that. Because thinking routines are just short, structured sets of open-ended questions that are designed to help learners engage with complex objects and ideas, like a work of art, like a math problem, or like the concept manifest destiny. The routines target key key thinking moves like observing and describing, reasoning with evidence, or uncovering complexity that can lead to deeper understanding of something. And after our experience together, we'll have some time to reflect and to consider classroom applications. And finally, we'll also share some of the National Gallery's resources for educators in case you'd like to know a little bit more. But I'd like us to just jump in. And I also want to acknowledge that this is a moment in your day. You've just wrapped up school, and maybe you're either on your way home or you're home and you've got kids and dogs and other laundry waiting for you. So this is like a little slice of your day. And so I just want us to really transition into this moment, if we can. And so the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is just be more comfortable. Wherever you're sitting, if you need to wiggle in your chair, you need to move your laptop, you need to grab a cup of coffee, be comfortable. And if you'd like, maybe sit up a little straighter. Let your spine grow long. Perhaps you're going to let your hands rest on your lap or on a table, or just let them hang down. And for just a moment, I'd like to invite you to either close your eyes if you're comfortable, or lower your gaze and take 2 deep breaths with me. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Thank you. So now, Julie, if you want to bring up our focal image for today, I want to invite you to open your eyes, lift your gaze, and we're going to look really carefully at this work of art. We're going to start by looking at it in its kind of totality, and then we're going to zoom in on some parts of the painting so that you can see the details more clearly. But as you're looking, just make some mental notes right now about like what's getting your attention. What did you see like first thing? Maybe you're noticing objects, figures, colors, or shapes. You might start your look in the foreground near things that are closest to us, and then move into the middle ground and into the background. And I think what we're going to do right now is transition into looking at this image using a zoom tool. On the gallery's website, many of our images are connected to this tool that allows you to zoom in. It's called IIIF technology. And I know Julie, who's steering the technology today, is going to pull up that image. And we're going to just look at some more of the details. And again, as you're looking, you don't have to write anything down. You don't have to share anything just yet. Just notice. Just look at what's happening as kind of Julie navigates through the painting. And again, see what new things you can find. Can you discover something you didn't notice at first? I think Julie's going to start by just scrolling across the foreground of the. See what new things you can find. Maybe you're noticing, maybe even the artist's signature. And then Julie's going to move into the middle ground and scroll across from right to left this time. Give you a better view of some of the greenery. Some of these amazing mountains. There's a tremendous amount of detail in this painting. And one of the things I love about the IIIF technology that Julie's using is you can actually see more with it than with the naked eye.
6:17 p.m.
We're going to move up into the sort of upper register of the painting, just to get a good look at those clouds. Wow. One last corner. Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. We're going to come back to the whole image. And as we do that, I want to invite you to take 30 seconds to jot down on that piece of paper or whatever you're working with, 30 seconds to jot down just some of the things you noticed as you looked at this work of art. What got your attention? You know, what's standing out to you? What did you notice as we went deeper into the landscape that's depicted here? Jot down just a few things. All right. So now I'd love to hear some of the things you noticed. And I know that your screens are off and that's totally cool, but I wonder if a few people would be willing to unmute and bring your voice into the room. You can raise your hand or you can just unmute and share. I'd love to hear one thing you noticed. You can also drop it in the chat. I've already got a few people in here. Somebody saw lightning. Someone described the landscape as beautiful. Someone noticed the color palette. I'd love to hear more. What did you notice? Either in the chat or to unmute, either is fine. Sandy ground with windswept waves. Thank you, Kathleen. Indigenous people traveling either to a new land or back to their village. Thanks, Anthony. It's very demure and cutesy, as my 8th graders would say. Sweet. Moran's use of lighting in this piece, he shadows the foreground and brings attention to the mesas. Indeed. The lone horse at the back, is he part of a group or is he the wild and following out of curiosity? Oh, and does everybody see that horse? If you look in the foreground about maybe 2/3 of the way over, you can see this lone horse and there's nobody on his back. Darkness into light, Anthony notices. Sunset, question mark. I agreed. Sunset, sunrise, full sun in the western sky or the full moon. You can see that beautiful sun or moon in the background. Horse with no rider, Anthony also noticed that. Any other observations? You've done a really great job of starting to create a visual inventory. Some additional observations or reflections in the water. Yeah, that's something that's really hard to see unless you use that triple IF. Gorgeous chalk ridges. Yeah, those stone structures, mesas, ridges are just phenomenal. Any other additions to our visual inventory? All right. Well, thank you. And I just want to share that like every detail that you noticed was a choice made by the artist. So you've already begun to develop a rich body of information about this work of art. And Edward just shared that he saw the artist's name and the date 1881. Absolutely. And so now I'd like to just begin to share just a little bit of the story of this painting, building on what you've already seen. You want to skip to the next? There we go. So just some basic tombstone information. The title of this painting is Green River Cliffs, Wyoming. It was painted by an artist named Thomas Moran in 1881. Edward, nice catch. And it lives at the National Gallery of Art. And if you saw it there, you would see that it's about 2 feet high and about 5 feet wide. It's a really like long horizontal painting. So, it's definitely worth checking out if you ever find yourself at the National Gallery of Art in our American collection. So the work was painted by the American artist Thomas Moran. And we're just going to flip and show you a couple pictures of him. So we have a couple of images of Mr. Moran. This first one here, this more formal posed picture is a picture of him from the 1890s. So, maybe 10 or more years after our key work of art was painted. But the other image, which is a little hard to see because it's quite old, is from 1871. And I'm going to tell you that's an important date. It shows Moran sort of out in the wilderness. There's some fish over there to his left, and he's just out there, out in the west in the wilds. So in 1871, Thomas Moran was invited to join an expedition led by geologist Ferdinand Hayden. It was the first government-sponsored trip to explore and document a wild and vast region of the American West called Yellowstone. And Yellowstone was little known by sort of the settler population. And so Moran was very excited to be the artist traveling with this exhibition. It was his first trip to the American West, and as part of this expedition. And while Yellowstone was his ultimate destination, Moran's train stopped and he disembarked at a place called Green River Cliffs, Wyoming. And the next slide. When Moran stepped off the train in Green River Cliffs, he was captivated and he created this watercolor almost immediately. It's called the first sketch, or what he calls the first sketch made in the West. However, what we see in Moran's paintings of Green River Cliffs, now we've seen two, is somewhat different from what it actually looked like in Green River in 1871. So I want to show you some photographs. So this is also Green River Cliffs, Wyoming. And Green River was actually a bustling railroad town when Moran arrived there in 1871. Just 3 years earlier, railroad construction crews had arrived on the scene. They were intent on having the railroad tracks go across the Green River. And their tent camp quickly became a booming town that boasted a schoolhouse and a brewery and a hotel, among other buildings. And here we see a photo from 1868 by Andrew J. Russell. He was the official photographer of the Union Pacific Railroad, showing the railroad being constructed. And you can see that, like that mesa off in the back, the one we just looked at. But then you can also start to see buildings and the railroad. Julie, could you just turn to the next photo as well? I love this photo. It's from 1876, and we don't know who took the picture, but again, it depicts Green River, and you can see more of those buildings that were in the background behind the railroad. And once again, you can still see that very special rock formation that's really easy to identify. Um, so when we look at Moran's painting, there is no evidence of this sort of industrialization and the sort of population that lived there. Instead, we see dazzling colors of the sculpted cliffs, and he brings our focus onto a band of American Indians moving across the landscape. Our next slide. Thank you. So Moran and the expedition, after they left Green River, uh, they explored and documented Yellowstone. And there was also a photographer who was along for the ride. It was William H. Jackson. He was the person who took that picture of Moran sitting there with fish. And so those two were part of the team. And Moran produced hundreds of sketches during his exploration of Yellowstone. And when the expedition party presented their findings to Congress, including Moran's sketches, these images played a pivotal role in the passage of the first National Park Bill, which was established, the Yellowstone National Park and the National Park Service in 1872. So these images were very powerful. The picture that you see on the screen right now is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and it's based on some of the sketches that Moran made while he was there. And then when he came back to Philadelphia, which is where he lived, he then created some more like sort of grand scale, highly finished paintings of some of those views. And that became a really important part of his work. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
Thanks, Heidi. So we're going to do the next step of our See, Think, Niue routine. We started out with the see, and we observed a lot of things that we noticed. So next, let's consider, what does this work of art make you think? What do you think is going on here? So you're welcome to integrate some of what Heidi shared and also use your own observations and thoughts. And you might jot down a thought or two on your own on the paper. And then whenever you're comfortable and ready, feel free to unmute yourself and just share it right out here with everyone, or add to the chat, whichever you would like. So again, the think question is, what does this work of art make you think? What do you think is going on? Amy's sharing westward expansion. Absolutely. And Maria adds on, yes, continued westward expansion really makes us think about that big topic. What about westward expansion does it make you think? What ideas does it kind of bring up for you? Kathleen shares pushing out the Native Americans. Tiffany is sharing it's a romanticized view of the West. And Monique shares it's the epitome of the frontier life glorified, including the idea of the noble savage and the emptiness that is waiting to be filled, quote unquote, noble savage. Thank you for sharing that. And Edward shares understanding who Moran is makes this more interesting based, a more interesting based interpretation. And Anthony shares it's a continuation of the Trail of Tears. Maria shares the idea of manifest destiny. Other thoughts? Anything else that this work of art really makes you think about? Anything else you think might be going on here? Kathleen shares, could this be seasonal migration that we're seeing? Um, Edward is sharing, just noticed that there's a cluster of teepees. Maybe the group is heading home for the day. Could there be symbolism here? Makes you think about symbolism. Clark shares reminiscing for the natural past as opposed to the contemporary industrialization. And Anthony, how Indigenous people have been forced to become invisible. Can you share more, Anthony, about how you're connecting that statement to what you're seeing in the painting? What do you see here that's making you think about that? There's a lot here we could dig into and unpack, especially for you as social studies teachers, thinking of all these various topics that are coming up as we think about this scene and kind of integrate some of what we've just heard about Moran and the times with this beautiful painting. I will also share a little bit, just as Heidi shared. And if you have other thoughts that come up, feel free to drop those in the chat.
Hey, Julie, I just want
Yeah.
to share Anthony's follow-up to your question.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. Great. Thank you, Heidi.
No, it's good. He writes, westward expansion and manifest destiny is pushing America to grow and take land that wasn't theirs to begin with.
Yes. Thank you for elaborating on that first thought. It's great. But I'd like to share now a little bit more. So in the foreground of Moran's painting here, we see this group of Indigenous people as you've described, and these likely are representing the Eastern Shoshone people who lived in the Green River area for thousands and thousands of years. However, the Eastern Shoshone people no longer lived in Green River when Moran created this painting. So this is a photograph of some of the Shoshone people in 1868 or 1869. And let's zoom into that photograph to get a closer look. You can see them here with a little bit more detail. And the Eastern Shoshone and the US government signed two treaties. So one was in 1863 and a second was 5 years later in 1868. During this time, the Eastern Shoshone people were led by Chief Washakie, and here's a photo of him in 1880. I'd also like to show you another photograph of him with his council of sub-chiefs, and this photograph is dated 1876. I think this is such a fascinating photograph. I could look at it for a long time. The Shoshone were a nomadic people who moved across the western part of the US and into Canada, and they were hunting buffalo as they moved. The Treaty of 1863 established specific borders around 44 million acres of land for the Eastern Shoshone. In 1868, the Fort Bridger Treaty was signed, and that reduced the amount of Shoshone land to 3.2 million acres and established the Shoshone Reservation. I'd like to show you a map that reveals here Green River Cliffs, which is down in the lower left area. And then it's quite a distance there from the 1868 Shoshone Reservation. Now in the painting, Green River Cliffs, Wyoming, we'll go back to the painting here. Moran chose not to show the impact of Western expansion, but instead he depicted this nostalgic view of the past, as you have noticed and as you were proposing in your interpretations of the painting earlier. And this was a past when Indigenous people still lived in the Green River Cliffs area. So over the course of 30 years, Moran created more than 40 paintings of this area, and there was certainly a market for works of art showing this very idyllic landscape of the American West. Here is one example of another oil painting that he did in 1874. So with all of this in mind, kind of layering in piece by piece, we're going to go to the next thinking move of our thinking routine, and Heidi will lead us out in that one.
Thank you, Julie. And thanks everyone for your really sort of interesting, and what you noticed. So we are going to go, we've done some C, done some thinking, and now we're going to kind of shift perspectives, and we're going to kind of turn our attention maybe away from the painting and more towards ourselves. And so I'd like to ask you to think about, how do you connect to this work of art and its stories? As if you were looking into a mirror, like what connections can you make between this work of art and your lived experience, your prior knowledge, your identity, your history? How do you connect with this work of art? And so I'm going to invite you to do just like some personal journaling about this question for just 2 or 3 minutes. And then when we come back, I'd love if a few people would be willing to share some aspect of what that connection looks like for you. So we're just gonna take the next maybe 2 minutes and invite you to jot down, how do you connect to this work of art? So really taking a personal view. All right, so I'm going to set my timer. Hey Siri, set the timer for 2 minutes. Another 30 seconds. 2 minutes goes fast. I'm sure this could be a much longer journal entry for many of us. Okay, when you're ready, just drop some thoughts in the chat. How does this connect with you? Edward writes, my travels since childhood to our Western national parks, to include my daughter's national park internships at several. Perhaps it can inspire our students to do the same. Side note, Dr. Ned Blackhawk's work on Indigenous people is best in class. Thanks for letting me share. Thanks for the reference and for sharing your personal experience and your connection to the national parks and with your family. I'd love to hear some other personal connections. Kathleen writes about the awe at the beauty of nature in Big Bend National Park. It is truly beautiful. As you're writing or thinking, I thought I might just share my own personal connection to this work of art. I was just thinking about it. This is a work of art that I've been teaching at the National Gallery for probably 10 years. And only recently, like very recently, did we gain information about who the Native people who lived in that area were, and like about the Shoshone and their leadership. And it just really makes me think about my own developing understanding of the sort of history of the US and Indigenous people. And then it also makes me think about also what's happening now with Indigenous people. And anyway, it's a journey. Like every time I reconnect with this work, I'm gaining something new from it. Thanks for letting me share that. Julia writes, Thomas Moran, along with Bierstadt, have always painted America as it appears in my happy memories. Well said. This painting has a soft feel. The light is not harsh. You can't feel the day's heat or the sharp rocks. Even the rock formation is softened. Yeah, really beautiful. Monique shared that her daughter got married in the Teton Mountains. Our time there was just a special moment, both in our own lives and just driving and hiking in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming area in wedding clothes. Lovely. Let's see. Anthony writes, in light of the painting reminds me that I will survive and push through life's difficulties and darkness. That's a beautiful reflection, Anthony. Thank you. Maria writes, this painting gives me all the feels. As a poor Hispanic girl growing up, I only saw pictures like this in books. But as an adult with a little bit more money, I was able to take my kids to see these places firsthand. Thank you, Maria. That's really special. Any other personal connections that folks would like to share? It's amazing how art has the power to like remind us, bring back memories, and it touches each of us differently, which I think is amazing as well. Clark writes, it reminds me of why I love history, being able to hold on to snapshots of the past and remember those who have been lost to time. Thank you, Clark. Yeah, thank you all. And I think we're going to move on to the sort of last part of the routine. And really, now that you've zoomed in on yourself, we're going to step back and think about the wider world. So, Julie?
So for our last step of our See Think Me We, as Heidi said, we're going to connect to the wider world, and imagine that this work of art is like a window for us. We've just looked at it kind of like a mirror, and now imagine that it's a window not only to the past, but to the present. How might this work of art connect us to or reveal to us bigger stories about the world and our place in it? So this is a very big question, but if you would just take a couple of minutes and think to yourself, and then when you're ready, jot something in the chat. Um, Again, how might the work connect us to or reveal bigger stories about the world and our place in it? So again, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to just share a thought verbally or share directly in the chat. What does this reveal? What does this painting reveal to us about bigger stories about the world in the past and the present and our place in it?
When I ask this question, Julia, I also think about like what's in the headlines and like, what is the connection between what's going on right now in our world and issues, questions, challenges that we've been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah. What Julia is sharing, I think it definitely has connections with our smallness in the vastness of nature. The figures, even those in the foreground, are relatively small and unimpressive when compared to the awesomeness of the natural world that we're surrounded by. What a beautiful reflection on the painting. Thank you for sharing that, Julia. This is a universal idea that and reality that spans whether we're in the 1800s or the 2000s. Here we are, and we can still hold that sense of awe regarding the vastness of nature. Monique is sharing, I feel like this world would have been used, I think that this would have been used as a way to legitimize government involvement in the protection of lands, eventually leading to our national park system. Or it could be a great landscape work that reminds us of our connection to the environment. Beautifully said. And I think, in fact, it likely was part of the many paintings that Moran made to encourage the national park system. And then Maria shares, most of my students have not traveled outside of the city. This painting gives them a glance about how big and beautiful this country is. Some of my kids come to me years after they've graduated and tell me of their travels to see places like this.
That's beautiful.
And that is so beautiful. And I love that about art, that we can have a little glimpse into a place that we might not have visited yet. Kathleen, the beauty of places we haven't been to and the displacement of the Indigenous people and how we can grow to consider this and how they appreciated their place. And it held a spiritual place in their lives that others are oblivious of. For example, Niagara Falls, that was a place of importance for the local people, but now is a big tourist trap with casinos. Hmm. So it helps us consider this other perspective of what the meaning of nature could be. Hmm. These are such profound reflections. I'm really just loving reading these and expanding my own thoughts on this painting. Is there anything else that you all would like to share before we move forward? Any other ideas of how this work connects to bigger stories about the world and our place in it?
Really, this makes me think a little bit about social media and the need to be skeptical of images that we see. Because I think
Mm,
about when this was a very popular painting. Many people saw it in the East, Philadelphia, New York. And so this is what they thought it looked like. So
mm,
people were relying on the images brought back from these kinds of expeditions to know, the people in the East Coast, to know what this land looked like. And so, I think earlier in our, a lot of folks mentioned that sort of nostalgia, kind of nostalgia for profit kind of situation. And because these sold really well, because they're incredibly beautiful. Um, but I think about that need to be skeptical of, in question
mhm.
sometimes what you see.
Absolutely. Makes me think of those like philosophical questions about truth and beauty,
Oh
right?
yeah, great. Yeah.
Like how does beauty help to reveal truth and capture our attention and draw us into something we might not have noticed or thought about before that is truthful? And
Yeah.
then how is it sometimes used to conceal or distort something um or propose an untruth, right?
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
And then Julia, I noticed Anthony added here, this work to me serves as a question to people in general, if progress and advancement is the worth the cost of our natural world.
Mm.
Mm,
Mhm.
great question.
That's a great question. And Edward shares this triggers and stimulates many ideas on why environmental history is so important. Awesome. Yes. I love that. So, as we continue to kind of let these questions simmer for us about personal connections and broader connections to the world, we'd like to invite you to just take a step back and think about now that we've moved through the steps of the See, Think, Me, We routine. What new observations, thoughts, or questions might you have about this painting, if any? But now that we've moved through those different steps, those different thinking moves, what new observations, thoughts, or questions are coming up for you? Give everyone just a moment to consider that. And if you'd like, add something to the chat and we'll read it out. Well, I know we've covered a lot of ground together just as we have done See, Think, Me, We. So we always want to invite another thought or idea that might come up at the end, if that's the case, that maybe doesn't fit into those categories. So if something else comes up, feel free to add that. We're going to go ahead and move forward and take some time to reflect. So The first question that we'd like to offer is, with your student hat still on, um, what qualities of this experience that we just had with See Think Me We and with the Moran painting, what qualities of it resonated with you? So we're kind of going to be metacognitive now. We're going to think about how did this experience feel for you? How did it work for you? Did something resonate for you?
Or was something challenging? Or something, did you
Absolutely.
have questions? Give us, we want to hear it.
Okay. Maria's sharing as a student that you would want to know more about the Hudson River School. That's great. So this is raising some curiosity to understand more about the school that the painter was a part of and understand more about the artist and the history around that. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Edward is sharing, yeah, there's so much more to learn about Thomas Moran's life. It was unknown until this evening, and another good part of this analysis. The images of the Shoshone were very effective and a bit of geography. Edward shares he liked the pedagogy of getting our students intellectually curious. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Edward. And Kathleen is sharing, it required me to slow down and really look and think. So strangely active, not just to be passive as a lecture would be, but also beautifully inspiring and inviting me into this area. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and Amy shares, as a student, I would ask, where are they now? What happened to them? And what does this place look like today? Fantastic. Yes. So even thinking about our See Think Me We question with like, what are those bigger connections to the world? How about bringing in a picture of what it's like today and bringing in some pictures of the Shoshone people today who are all through our world and our society.
A great suggestion, actually. I'd
Yeah.
like to add that to our next presentation on this work board, bringing it up to today. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So good. Feel free to continue to answer that as other thoughts come in. We have another question for you. How do you want to share that
Oh,
one?
sure. Yeah, no. So, and not that you can divide yourself into two, but with your teacher hat on, any thoughts about how you might apply this routine or this artwork, or some aspect of this experience in your classroom? I know, it's a lot to think about, like how you might use this so quickly, but we do like really hope that there are some kind of immediate takeaways, and maybe there's some long-term explorations as well. So just love to hear, is there anything that you were like, oh, I'd like to try this, or I might like to do this with my students? A gallery walk or a station rotation? Thanks, Andy. That's anything where you can get up, move around, um, do a gallery walk. Great idea. We do this while you guys are writing. We do this gallery walk that we call a chalk talk. Again, like you all may be familiar with this, but it's silent. And so like if people have put like ideas up on big paper around the room, or people have put up the works that they've made or their ideas or posters, and then folks walk around silently, adding their notes or additions or questions to those documents. I love a good gallery walk, chalk talk. Julia writes, as an art teacher, I would use this painting and have students compare their ideological imagery of America with some paintings that emerged during the Dust Bowl. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, with nature is like so awesome and beautiful, and nature is so awesome and terrible. Yeah. Julie, do you want to drop the two guiding questions in there too, just in case it helps prompt people's thoughts?
Sure.
Monica writes, I would love to use this to introduce the Indigenous story in my dual credit classes. Lovely. We're going to be providing you with both this PowerPoint as well as a one pager of links to lots of things. So hopefully if you'd like to do that, you can. This is totally cool now that we are heading into the revolution. This can be added to another strategy called QSSSA. Find other art pieces to evaluate and identify possible biases. That's scrolled pretty fast. Or perspectives evident in the image. Yeah, I love that. Could print this image out as a puzzle and each group getting a section of the art and analyzing it before seeing the full picture in class. Oh, Laura, fun. And yes, Maria, I agree. There you go. And Julie just dropped the guiding questions into this slide. How did looking at works of art help us engage in complex thinking about American history? And how did making connections between the work of the past connect to our present and help deepen our understanding? Those were sort of our guiding questions for today. If you have any response to those or the other questions. Julie writes, on making the connection question, I really love the idea you brought up, where this was the idea of the West that those on the East Coast were receiving in the 19th century, which corresponds so closely to the same type of pictures we get on social media. Yep, so true. All right, well, feel free to continue to add to the chat. We just want to thank you so much for this, digging in with us into this material, into this work of art. And now I'm going to turn it back to Julie, and she's going to just share with you some resources. So sit back and relax. You've done the work. And now Julie's just going to share with you some links for further study in case you're interested. Or I'm just let me kind of read that what Maria sent though. I don't want to lose that. Artwork is so important because it allows kids to see snapshots of the life and times that we study. Yeah, it kind of brings us a greater sense of reality and realness. For sure. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So the work that we've the thinking routine, I should say, that we've shared today is we want to credit Harvard Project Zero for that thinking routine. And that routine came out of the Arts as Civic Commons project. Heidi and myself and a team of us educators at the National Gallery have collaborated with Harvard's Project Zero for many years. We have implemented many of the ideas that researchers up there have developed. And we've tweaked them for museum work and collaborated with teachers to tweak them even more. There are a couple projects that we have really connected strongly with because they've resonated so deeply for us as museum educators and also for the teachers that we've worked with for many years. So one of those is the Artful Thinking Project. And some of the things that some of the thinking moves that we did today came from the Artful Thinking Project, and then the Arts as Civic Commons was created by the same researcher, Shari Tishman, who developed Artful Thinking. And as you can see, when we did like see, we were observing and describing. That's a way that we're thinking deeply. When we did our think, we were reasoning, another way of thinking deeply. And then when we were doing the me and the we were comparing and connecting, which is another thinking move. that's very strategic and something that can be transferred across disciplines. So because our team has found this pedagogy to be so resonant, we've created a few programs built around this pedagogy, and one of those programs is our online courses. So we just launched a new course, just like Laura shared at the very beginning, reading our bios. Our online course that just launched a few months ago is called Teaching Complex Thinking Through Art with the National Gallery of Art. And we're going to provide you links for these in a PDF that Laura will put on the Google Classroom for you all, along with the PDF of this slide deck. But we just wanted to do a little plug to encourage you to check out the course, and I'm going to take you inside of the course in just a minute. The course, like I said, is free. It has four content units and then a welcome unit. So we go into those thinking dispositions that I shared on this former slide: comparing and connecting, exploring viewpoints, and finding complexity. Now we have a course that launched back in 2019, and I'll share that information with you in a little bit later. But that one really goes in depth on the top three thinking dispositions: observing, describing, reasoning, and questioning, investigating. That's our first course, Teaching Critical Thinking Through Art. Second course goes into the other three, Teaching Complex Thinking. And then we have this wonderful unit at the end on kind of how to document and assess the thinking that you're seeing as you're using works of art in your curriculum. This is not just for art teachers, it's for teachers of many different subjects. And in fact, we find that social studies teachers, humanities teachers tend to really connect strongly with the content. There are several lessons that are specifically geared toward social studies content. Every unit in the course has downloadable image decks, templates, arts integration lessons that you can use right away. You just download them, use them right away in your classroom. So there's no like translation that's needed of like, oh, let me see how I can work this out for my classroom. It's all right there. And then there are also really fun videos that are like live action lessons with students who say, the darndest things, as they say. They just say they're like little lessons that unfold, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just said that. And it's just so either deep and profound, and they're getting something, or they'll say something funny. And we're very proud of our lessons, and these unfold in real time with teachers using art to teach curriculum and using thinking routines. So we hope that you'll check that out. Let me just take a minute. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to go into the course. So give me just a second. Okay. So let me share my new. Okay. Having a little glitch in edX. The two courses live on the edX platform, and I'm going to show them to you now. Okay, so once you sign into edX, it does require a sign in. There's no cost for it. You can access both courses. You can sign up for either one in either order. And you can, once you sign up, you have 4 months of access to the course at no cost. If you would like to have full access for a year and have a verified certificate that includes like some quizzes that you are required to take to get your certificate. It's $119 in edX. And some teachers like to do that, and then they show their verified certificate to the PD, whoever is verifying PD hours, and then they get PD credit for their state. So that's an option. It's about 20 hours of content. So let's go into our complex thinking course, which is our new one. You can see how the units are set up right here, just as I showed you on the PowerPoint. And I'm going to go into comparing and connecting, because within the comparing and connecting unit, there is a section that features the See, Think, Me, We routine that we use today. Now, every section features a different routine and a different work of art. So there are opportunities, like you can see here, to focus, if you have a teacher friend who teaches math, you might refer them to this too. There's a lesson here on math and connecting that to sculpture. We have some that really focus on language arts, like stepping inside perspective taking and writing monologues, for example, and it goes on. But we also have a number of social studies connections, especially here, like global issues, bridging contemporary sculpture with global issues, the circle of viewpoints in the classroom, getting at perspective taking, which can be transferred to social studies. There are a lot of juicy themes here. We worked closely with classroom teachers to develop this, wanting it to be very relevant for you. So here, I'm going to just walk you through kind of one of the sections so that you see what's involved. The way it would start is that at the beginning of every section, we ask the online participant to engage with the work of art that they're about to see a student group engage with on video. So this is like part of our pedagogy. We are always like participatory. We want to be doing it before we're talking about it. So here is the work that we use for this one, which is Target by John Quick to C. Smith, who is a Native American artist working today. And here we have the See, Think, Me, We routine, and we have we try to make it a little bit fun in the ways people can engage. So this would be like a word cloud. You would put your 5 words in and it shows up in this big word cloud with a lot of other responses. And then the think part, here we just have a multiple choice for fun, keeping it light. And then for the me and the we, you can go into Padlet and look at all the different ways that other people have responded with how they personally connect with this artwork, and then the bigger societal connections that they're noticing. So you can be part of this larger conversation going on and see all these other educators around the world. I think we have educators in like 158 countries who have engaged with our online courses. So that would be like page 1 of the section. And then you go to the next page, and here we have the lesson video. This lesson features a museum educator teaching a group of 10th and 11th graders at the museum. And these are social studies students. Their social studies teacher brought them. I think it's actually a global studies class. But they're focused on contemporary social and global issues in the curriculum. And then they had so many deep connections to this work of art. And here underneath the video, this is where a lot of these downloadable resources live that I shared with you, and they're available in also not only English, but Spanish, French, and simplified Chinese. All right, so then on the next page, we have some takeaways. So this is where that kind of unpacking kind of teacher PD comes in, where this is the piece where, you might have noticed some takeaways for yourself, or, some people who maybe don't do a lot of teaching with art might watch it and say, wow, that video is really cool. I'm not really sure exactly though what I should be, how I can apply this. And this is where it breaks it down with specific tips of how you can do these strategies in your classroom. So things like supplying information strategically, supporting thinking with evidence, developing social emotional wellness through personal connections, reflecting on the lesson together. And often we have slide decks that are downloadable, and you can put these right on your computer if you'd like. This one is about culturally responsive teaching. So we go through several different theories and pedagogies and approaches for what is culturally responsive teaching. This one highlights the work of Dr. Maria Akinyele at Teachers College. She was a speaker for our Summer Institute. And so you can see there are some tips and examples of how you can create culturally responsive lessons with and for your students. We've got discussions here, and then we always have a page that's what's the story behind the art, and that includes an audio clip, 2 audio clips of stories about the work and about the artist that you can play directly in your class, or you can download the audio clip. You can also download the transcript for them and just read those or use those as your own little information share when you teach the lesson. And then we have a lot of different resources and links provided if you want to go even deeper into the artwork, the artist. We suggest children's books. If we try to make it as easy as it can be to either kind of skim the surface here and just get that lesson out there, or do a really deep dive into the subject if you would like. So we go to the next page here, and then we have a video featuring a professor from one of the researchers from Harvard who's talking about why is it important to do this, what happens in learning. This can be a great source as well for explaining to your administrator, why are we spending time doing these thinking routines? Or to parents, just sharing the value that these thinking moves can have for their students across the curriculum, and then especially in social studies. And then we always end with an opportunity to read some deeper articles on the topic. You can take a quiz to check your learning, and we have some PDF downloadable readings for you to do as well. So that's just a sample of one section of this very rich online course that's available for you to take. Let me go back now. Thank you so much for listening to all of that. I know that's a lot of talking, but we found that teachers appreciate when we can kind of show them all the different parts. So thanks for bearing with me on that. And I hope that whets your appetite and interest for engaging in our course. We have a lot of other resources too, not just the online courses. We have Uncovering America on our website. That is basically social studies themes galore, so many themes on there that will directly connect to your social studies curriculum with downloadable image sets, sets of different kinds of questions to use to interact with the digital artwork in those image sets. We also offer virtual and in-person field trips for your class. So if you're coming to DC, let us know. We'd love to meet you in person and see your students and have a tour with them. If you're not, though, we can do it virtually. So Zoom us in, and we'd love to do that. And then we also have virtual teacher workshops. We have 2 coming up. They're not yet posted on our website, but they will be in a couple of weeks. So mark your calendars. And we'd love to see you there. I think going to be on Wednesday late afternoon. And then we want to make sure you have access to Harvard Project Zero's Arts to Civic Commons handbook. If you liked the routine we used today, there are a whole bunch of other ones as well that are specifically about engaging in civic conversations. There's more about the Native Knowledge 360. It's an awesome website if you're teaching the subjects that we talked about today, and a link to our own website page for more about this painting that we focused on today. So all this is available in the PDF that is going to be in the Google Classroom. Please be sure to check it out. We want to thank you so much for participating with us today, and we'll just open the floor for any questions for the rest of our time together.
Thank you all so much. This was great.
Thank you for the comments in the chat. Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks, Maria. Awesome. Glad it was informative. That's what we wanted it to be.